Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something that's getting more and more important for quantity surveyors like you. Life cycle analysis, or LCA for short.
Yeah, LCA. It's basically a way of looking at a building's whole environmental picture.
Not just the initial cost.
No, not just that. We're talking about everything, from the materials all the way to, how much energy it takes to actually run the building over its whole lifespan.
So like how green a building really is from start to finish.
Exactly.
I bet this wasn't really a big deal for quantity surveyors a few years back.
True. Things move fast, though.
Oh, for sure.
Clients are way more environmentally conscious now. Regulations are stricter. And honestly, it's a way for quantity surveyors to, stand out.
Right, so it's not just a nice to have anymore. It's a must-have.
Absolutely. And you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
LCA often shows us things we didn't expect, things that challenge what we thought we knew about sustainable building.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's break it down. How does this whole LCA process work, step by step?
So there are four main stages. First, goal and scope. We figure out what we're actually trying to do with the LCA.
Defining the mission.
Right. What environmental impacts are we focusing on and why?
Kind of like when we scope out a project before even bidding, right?
Yeah.
Got to make sure we're not missing anything important.
Spot on. A super clear scope is key because it sets the boundaries for the whole analysis. If we're not clear on that from the beginning, the results can be misleading.
Got it. Makes sense. So what's next after goal and scope?
Inventory analysis.
Okay.
This is the data gathering phase. Inputs and outputs across the building's entire life, quantifying everything. Energy, water, materials, emissions, you name it.
Sounds like a ton of number crunching.
It is. But then comes the fun part, impact assessment. We take all that data and figure out what it means for the environment, not just adding numbers, but understanding their real impact.
So we're translating data into real-world consequences.
Precisely. Finally, we have interpretation. Looking at the results, making sure they're reliable, figuring out which areas have the biggest environmental impact. We also have to be honest about the analysis limitations.
So after all that analysis, what's usually the biggest factor in a building's impact?
You might be surprised. And it's something quantity surveyors like you have a lot of control over.
Oh, now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
It's the building's operational energy. Heating, cooling, lighting, the whole shebang. This is often the biggest culprit.
Really? I would guess the materials themselves would have a bigger impact.
It's a common thought, but research shows something different. Operational energy can be, wait for it, 80 to 90% of a building's total life cycle energy use. It's huge.
Wow. So my decisions about materials have a big impact on the building's energy use down the line.
100%. You're in a powerful position to make a real difference.
I'm starting to see how LCA connects to my work. Let's talk more about those materials. What else should I be thinking about apart from operational energy?
Well, there's embodied energy, too. All the energy used to make, transport, and install those materials.
All the hidden energy?
Exactly. And, fun fact, the energy to demolish a building at the end of its life.
Yeah.
Tiny compared to producing and installing those materials in the first place.
So the real impact happens way before demolition.
You got it. And this embodied energy, we can break it down further.
Oh, okay.
Direct and indirect. Direct, that's the on-site stuff, like installation. Indirect, most of it, actually. That happens off-site during production.
So like extracting raw materials, making the materials, shipping them, all that?
Yeah. And quantity surveyors need to think about both.
Got it. I've been hearing a lot about using wood as a more sustainable option. Where does that fit in?
Good question. Studies DO show that wood framing is more energy efficient than, say, steel or concrete.
So natural materials are always better.
Well, hold on. It's tempting to think that, but it's not always so simple.
Okay. I have a feeling there's a story here.
There is. One study compared different types of insulation. Recycled paper, stone wool, and flax, which is a natural plant fiber.
Okay.
Guess what? The recycled paper insulation was actually the best, environmentally speaking.
So even though flax is natural, it wasn't the most eco-friendly.
Exactly. We got to look at the whole picture, not just assumptions.
I see your point. The type of building must matter too, right? A skyscraper is different from a house.
Absolutely. Building use is key. Office buildings tend to be way more energy intensive than homes.
Why is that?
Well, they often use more steel and concrete.
Which are energy hogs.
Exactly. Plus, more people crammed in, more energy needed for all the systems.
Makes sense. So if everyone worked from home, that could actually be good for the environment.
It's an interesting thought. Less energy used in those big office buildings could be a win for sustainability.
Wow. Never thought about it like that.
Uh,
This LCA thing is really making me think. But there's got to be more to this story, right?
You bet there is. LCA is constantly evolving. One cool thing, we're starting to use input-output economic models.
Ooh, fancy. What are those?
They help us understand how different parts of the economy are connected, gives us a more complete picture of a building's impact.
So, like, we're not just looking at the building itself, but all the activities that go into making it.
Exactly. But there's a challenge.
What's that?
Making all this LCA stuff easy to understand and USE, especially for professionals like you.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like there's a wall between the research and what we do on the ground.
I hear you. But the good news is there are people working on bridging that gap. We were talking about how wood can be a good choice, more energy efficient than steel or concrete.
Right. But you were saying it's not always that simple.
It's not. We got to look at the whole life cycle of the material. Where it comes from, how it's made, what happens to it in the end.
So with wood, it's not just about the type of wood.
Nope. It matters where it comes from, how it was produced. That's where quantity surveyors can really make a difference, advocating for responsibly sourced materials.
Okay, so what should I be looking for?
Certifications, like the FSC, Forest Stewardship Council.
FSC, got it.
Yeah. That means the wood comes from well-managed forests. They care about the environment and social responsibility.
So sustainable forestry is a big part of using wood the right way.
It is. And remember that insulation study? Recycled paper beating out the stone, wool, and flax.
Oh, yeah. That was surprising.
It shows how important recycled content is.
So using recycled materials means we don't need to keep digging up new stuff.
Exactly. And it often takes less energy to make.
Less impact from the start.
You got it. And it's not just about using recycled stuff. There's also recyclability to think about.
Wait, I'm a little confused. What's the difference between recycled content and recyclability?
Good question. Recycled content is how much of the material in a product comes from old stuff, like recycled plastic or reclaimed wood.
Okay, makes sense.
But recyclability, that's how easily we can recycle it at the end of its life.
Got it. So we want materials that can have a second life, not end up in a landfill.
You got it. Closing the loop. Choosing materials that are easy to recycle. That's key for minimizing waste.
I'm seeing my job in a whole new light. It's not just about crunching numbers anymore. It's about making choices that are good for the planet.
That's the spirit. Speaking of the future, what challenges and opportunities do you think LCA faces in the coming years?
Good question. What do you think?
Well, we talked about making LCA easier to understand. That's still a big one. All that research needs to be translated into something quantity surveyors can actually use every day.
I agree. Sometimes it feels like there's this gap between the research and the real world.
You're right. But the good news is there are people working on bridging that gap. Things like LCA databases, software that makes the analysis easier, that kind of stuff.
Oh, that would be amazing. Easy access to LCA data would be a game changer.
Absolutely. Another trend I'm seeing is whole building LCA.
Whole building LCA. What's that?
So in the past, LCA was often done piece by piece, material by material. But a building is a system, right? All the parts work together.
So we need to look at the whole building, not just the individual parts.
Exactly. Whole building LCA takes a bigger picture approach.
Makes sense. Are there tools for that?
Yeah. There are some cool building performance simulation tools that use LCA principles.
So I would use these tools to compare different options like wall types or HVAC systems. See which is best from an LCA standpoint.
Yep. It helps you make smarter decisions during the design phase.
That would be amazing. Building for sustainability from the very beginning. But let's be real. All this technology, it's going to cost a lot, right?
True. It's an investment.
Yeah.
But I think the benefits in the long run, way bigger than the initial cost.
I'm starting to see that. What else do you see changing in LCA? Any big trends we should be watching for?
Well, I think the circular economy is going to be huge.
We touched on that before. Remind me, what does a circular economy look like for construction?
It's all about moving away from the take, make, waste model. We want to reuse, repurpose, recycle as much as possible.
Closing the loop, right? Keep those materials in circulation.
You got it. And LCA is going to be really important for assessing that. We'll be looking at how durable materials are, how easy they are to take apart and reuse.
So it's not just about doing less harm. It's about actually making things better.
Exactly. I think this shift towards circularity is going to change everything about how we design and build.
I'm excited to see where it all goes. This deep dive into LCA has been really eye-opening.
Glad to hear it. And remember, quantity surveyors have a huge role to play in making all this happen. Your expertise is what's going to drive those sustainable practices.
That's a good point. We're not just number crunchers. We're the ones who can make a real difference. Any other key takeaways you want to highlight for our listeners before we wrap up?
Absolutely. LCA is a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
It's all about continuous improvement, right? We learn new things, get better at it, and keep understanding how buildings and the environment work together.
It's not about being perfect. It's about always trying to do better.
Exactly. Stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to push the boundaries.
This deep dive's been awesome. Seriously, I'm already thinking about how to use this LCA stuff in my work. It's amazing how much potential it has to, change how we build.
That's what I like to hear. Remember last time we were talking about the future of LCA, where it's all headed?
Right. Time to make some predictions. What's next for LCA?
Well, I think data is going to be huge, making it easier to access and use. We talked about that gap between research and practice.
Yep.
Technology can help bridge that gap. Imagine having instant access to LCA data for, tons of materials.
Yeah.
Updated all the time.
That would be so helpful, like a one-stop shop for LCA info.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
imagine software that does a lot of the calculations for you.
Oh, wow.
Then quantity surveyors can focus on, understanding the results, making decisions, not getting lost in spreadsheets.
Like having an LCA assistant right in your computer.
Exactly. Another exciting thing, I think we'll see LCA and BIM working together more closely.
Ah, BIM. It's like a virtual building, right?
Yep. A digital twin.
But how does LCA fit in with all that?
What if we could link LCA data directly to the BIM model? So when you change the design in BIM,
Yeah.
the LCA calculations update automatically.
Whoa. So you can see the environmental impact of your choices right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes sustainability part of the design process from the very beginning.
I love that.
Yeah.
But let's be real. All this tech, someone's got to pay for it.
True. It takes investment. But think long term, the benefits outweigh the costs. I really believe that.
Okay, I'm with you. What else is on the horizon for LCA? Any big picture shifts we should be aware of?
I think the circular economy is going to keep getting bigger.
We talked about that, but remind me, what does that actually mean for buildings?
It's about moving away from that old take, make, waste model. We want to reuse, repurpose, recycle everything we can.
Closing the loop.
Exactly. And LCA will help us assess that. We'll look at how durable things are, how easy they are to take apart and reuse.
So we're not just doing less harm, we're making things better.
That's the goal. I think this shift towards circularity, it's going to change everything about how we build.
This has been an awesome deep dive. Seriously, I'm fired up to use what I've learned and start pushing for more sustainable practices.
That's what I like to hear. Remember, you have the power to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Embrace LCA, stay curious, and let's keep working towards a better future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been amazing.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We hope you've learned a lot about LCA and how important it is for the future of construction. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We'll see you next time.